New York, 2019. In a small apartment in Queens, Chinese dissidents had gathered. Around the table sat men and women of various ages, from young students to gray-haired veterans of the democratic movement. A photo of Tiananmen Square from 1989 hung on the wall, and books by authors banned in China stood on the shelves. The atmosphere was tense. Activists were discussing plans for large-scale protests against Xi Jinping's planned visit to the UN. Among them was a man everyone knew as a true hero of the democratic movement, a participant in the historic 1989 protests at Tiananmen Square. His name was mentioned with respect in émigré circles. He was trusted with the opposition's deepest secrets, and even the most radical activists listened to his opinion. Scars on his hands told of prison years, and his blue eyes burned with the same fire of freedom as 30 years ago. But at this moment, while activists were carefully planning protest actions, assigning roles and discussing demonstration routes, this respected man was secretly recording the conversation on a miniature digital recorder hidden in the inner pocket of his jacket. His fingers imperceptibly pressed buttons when he pretended to check his phone or adjust his glasses. Later, this recording, along with photographs of documents and detailed reports about moods in the émigré community, would reach the hands of Chinese intelligence through a complex system of couriers and encrypted communication channels. How did a former fighter for democracy become a traitor? This story turns everything we think about espionage, trust, and the price of survival in an era of global authoritarianism upside down. China's Ministry of State Security, the MSS, is one of the most powerful and mysterious intelligence services in the modern world. Created in 1983 after reforming previous structures, the MSS combined the functions of foreign intelligence and counterintelligence under unified leadership. Unlike the Soviet KGB, which mainly hunted for political secrets and military plans of adversaries, the Chinese are playing a fundamentally different, much longer game. A game for humanity's technological future. Their strategic goal is simple to formulate but revolutionary in scale. Within 2 to 3 decades, not just catch up with, but dramatically surpass the West in all critically important technological sectors. From revolutionary next-generation microchips to quantum computers capable of breaking any modern cryptography, from artificial intelligence systems to space technologies for further exploration of the solar system. The main department of the MSS handles foreign intelligence and has numerous residencies worldwide, disguised as cultural centers, trade representations, and academic institutes. The second main department is responsible for counterintelligence and internal security, including surveillance of their own citizens abroad. The third department specializes in technical intelligence and cyber espionage, becoming one of the most powerful hacking organizations on the planet. The MSS operates on the unique principle of 1,000 grains of sand, a strategy that fundamentally differs from Western approaches to espionage. Instead of several highly professional super agents like James Bond, the Chinese have created and coordinate a vast army of small, often unconscious informants scattered around the world like grains of sand on a huge beach. A student from Shanghai who sends an interesting scientific article to his Chinese professor after an internship in an American laboratory. An engineer from Guangzhou who shares technical impressions from an international conference with an old university friend who happens to be an employee of a state corporation. A successful businessman who consults for a promising Chinese tech company for quite generous money, not suspecting its connections to the military-industrial complex. Each individual case doesn't pose a serious threat to national security, but together, these thousands of tiny streams of information create a huge river of data flowing directly to the central analytical departments of the MSS in Beijing. In 2018, at the request of American intelligence services, Chinese MSS officer Xu Yanjun was arrested in Brussels, Belgium. This became a historic precedent, as Europeans agreed for the first time to extradite to the United States an active high-ranking Chinese intelligence officer. For 3 long years, this experienced operative methodically spent millions of dollars in state funds on a complex operation to recruit leading engineers and technical specialists from the American Aviation Corporation, General Electric Aviation. He was primarily interested in the most secret technologies for manufacturing high-temperature aviation engines of the next generation, ultra-light composite materials for military aviation, complex computer flight control and navigation systems, and fuel efficiency optimization algorithms. Each of these technological elements cost American companies tens of millions of dollars and years of the most complex research. Xu's method of work was simultaneously elegantly simple and devilishly effective. He presented himself as a respected scientist from the prestigious Beijing University of Technology, actively invited promising American engineers to international scientific and technical conferences at the best hotels in China, offered generous fees for supposedly purely academic consultations, and experience exchange between colleagues. Gradually, regular meetings became more frequent and trusting, discussion topics became technically deeper and more specific, and the promised money became larger and more attractive. And then, when potential targets finally relaxed and lost vigilance, seemingly innocent requests appeared to share publicly available technical information, which actually contained critically important industrial secrets. American engineers simply didn't understand that they had become the main targets of a long-term and professionally planned intelligence operation until FBI agents showed them detailed recordings of all conversations and documentary evidence of bank transfers from Chinese accounts. Some of them unconsciously transferred several thousand pages of the most secret technical documentation to representatives of Chinese intelligence without even beginning to realize the true scale of potential damage to national security. But the roots of modern Chinese technological penetration into the American system reach much deeper into the complex past of relations between the two superpowers. Larry Wu Tai-chin, possibly the most successful and dangerous Chinese spy in all of American intelligence history. For an incredible 35 years, from 1950 to 1985, he worked as an analyst and translator in various critically important divisions of American intelligence and diplomatic service. For 35 continuous years, Chin systematically transmitted the most valuable American state secrets to Chinese leadership: CIA strategic plans in the Asian region, confidential diplomatic correspondence at the highest level, detailed military assessments and forecasts, internal discussions about U.S. foreign policy strategy. When Chin was finally exposed thanks to information from a defector from Chinese intelligence, it turned out that over all these decades of espionage, he had earned only $140,000, a ridiculously small sum for such a scale of betrayal. He was driven not by ordinary human greed, but by deep ideological devotion to communist ideals. He sincerely believed he was helping the great historical reunification of divided China and heroically opposing American imperialism throughout the world. Before the start of the trial, Larry Chin committed suicide in a federal prison cell, leaving a dying note with painful words: "I love America and China equally. I just think China needs more help." San Francisco, 1990s. Katrina Leong seemed like an absolutely perfect informant for the local FBI office. Of Chinese origin, she had extraordinarily wide and deep connections in the local Chinese diaspora, and for years provided the Federal Bureau with truly valuable operational information about suspicious activities of various Chinese organizations, possible funding channels, and potential security threats. The FBI trusted Leong so completely and unconditionally that it even assigned her regular financial compensation as a staff confidant and gave her special status as a trusted person with access to certain operational materials. The leadership of the local office considered her one of the most valuable sources of information about the Chinese community on the West Coast. But a multi-year investigation eventually established a shocking fact. For many years, Katrina Leong could have simultaneously worked as a double agent for the benefit of the MSS, systematically transmitting to Chinese handlers the most detailed information about American counterintelligence operations against Chinese targets on U.S. territory. Thanks to her privileged position, she knew practically everything: which specific Chinese citizens American intelligence services suspected of espionage activities, what exact technical channels and methods counterintelligence units used for surveillance, who among members of the local diaspora secretly cooperated with the FBI as an informant or agent of influence. This top-secret information was simply worth its weight in gold for Chinese intelligence operatives, allowing them to warn their agents in advance about threats, redirect suspicious individuals, and effectively neutralize American operations at the planning stage. But the biggest scandal that undermined trust in the entire system occurred when federal investigators discovered a shocking fact. Katrina Leong simultaneously had intimate romantic relationships with two different FBI agents, both of whom had high clearance and direct access to the most secret materials about Chinese operations on American territory. One of them, experienced Agent James J. Smith, even actively used his official powers to help Leong obtain American citizenship and special secret clearance to work with classified materials. As an internal investigation later established, Smith regularly disclosed to his lover the most secret information about other Chinese FBI informants, their real names and cover pseudonyms. The Katrina Leong case literally split and demoralized American counterintelligence on the West Coast. Formal espionage charges against her ultimately couldn't be proven in court due to serious procedural violations during evidence collection, but the loud scandal undermined professional trust in dozens of parallel FBI operations against suspected Chinese agents. How many strategically important operations failed due to Leong's warnings and interference? How many real Chinese professional intelligence officers avoided deserved punishment thanks to her timely signals about threats? American counterintelligence still doesn't have complete and final answers to these critically important questions. Meanwhile, in Southern California, a parallel drama was unfolding, no less painful for national security. Chi Mak, a 66-year-old engineer of Chinese ethnic origin, had conscientiously worked for more than 20 years for leading American defense contractors developing the most complex military electronics for the needs of the U.S. Navy and other law enforcement agencies. Colleagues and management considered him an absolutely reliable and loyal employee. He had official clearance for secret materials and a reputation as a talented professional. No one even remotely suspected that Mac had been methodically photographing the most secret drawings and technical specifications for many years, then transmitting them through a complex network of Chinese couriers directly into the hands of military analysts in Beijing. The case became even more dramatic and complex when American investigation established that Chi Mak was not alone. He organized a real family dynasty of spies, involving his closest relatives in secret activities. His wife Rebecca Lavrova Mak actively helped copy secret documents and organize their secure storage. Younger brother Tai Wang Mak worked at another leading defense company and simultaneously stole his portions of industrial secrets. Daughter-in-law Fuck Hee Lee performed functions as an international courier, regularly transporting encrypted disks with information during tourist trips to mainland China. The Mak family members weren't professional career intelligence officers with years of training. They were ordinary labor migrants who felt deep cultural and emotional loyalty to their historic homeland. Experienced MSS operatives masterfully used these natural patriotic feelings, gradually convincing the entire family that they were making a sacred contribution to the great historic revival of the Chinese nation and helping their country take its rightful place among world technological leaders. For the Maks, this wasn't betrayal of America, which gave them shelter and opportunities, but noble help to China, which needed technological support to compete with Western corporations. They sincerely believed in the correctness of their actions and the historical justice of technological redistribution. For a full 20 years of systematic activity, the Mak family clan transmitted to representatives of Chinese military intelligence many thousands of pages of the most secret documents about advanced military electronic systems, communication and coordination systems, next-generation sonar, guided navigation torpedoes, and other critically important naval technologies. The American fleet actually lost its historic and strategically important technological advantage in key areas through the ordinary ethnic loyalty and family solidarity of one Chinese family living an ordinary American life in the suburbs of Los Angeles. But modern Chinese penetration into American society goes far beyond traditional boundaries of classic espionage and technological theft. The massive Fox Hunt operation is an unprecedented global campaign of systematic persecution of Chinese dissidents, political oppositionists, and economic fugitives worldwide, regardless of their citizenship and country of residence. Officially, this program is positioned by Chinese leadership as a noble international fight against corruption and return of stolen state funds. But in reality, it's methodical transnational hunting of regime critics, independent journalists, human rights defenders, and anyone who dared to publicly criticize the Communist Party's policies. In the multinational Brooklyn neighborhood, American federal prosecutors uncovered and thoroughly documented a complex scheme of psychological and physical intimidation of a Chinese political activist who had openly criticized the Communist Party in his publications and speeches for years. An organized group of Chinese agents of various levels systematically stalked him, photographed his daily life, threatened physical violence against relatives in mainland China, and tried various ways to force him into complete silence or voluntary return to the homeland for clarification of relations. This is fundamentally no longer classic espionage in the traditional sense. These are open transnational repressions, direct export of dictatorial methods abroad, gross violation of national sovereignty and international law. Even stranger and more alarming are the secret, unofficial police stations of the Chinese government in America's largest cities and other countries worldwide. In cosmopolitan New York, 2 Chinese citizens officially admitted guilt in creating and maintaining such a disguised police post on behalf of Chinese intelligence services. Officially, these institutions were supposed to help Chinese citizens with processing various bureaucratic documents and consular services. But in reality, their main function was total surveillance of the local diaspora, collecting compromising information about regime critics and compiling detailed lists of politically unreliable Chinese abroad. According to international intelligence services, such disguise stations secretly operated simultaneously in dozens of countries worldwide, from Canada to Italy, from Australia to the Netherlands. They officially helped with processing Chinese driver's licenses and other routine procedures, but simultaneously carefully cataloged all local Chinese by degree of political loyalty and potential threat to the regime. Imagine, in the very center of New York, a few blocks from the UN, Chinese secret police were actually operating, collecting dossiers on American citizens and reporting directly to the Chinese MSS in Beijing, completely ignoring American jurisdiction and laws. Chinese students at prestigious American universities became another powerful and effective tool of indirect influence and information gathering. The absolute majority of them are ordinary and completely innocent young people who sincerely came to get quality Western education and build successful futures. But among these tens of thousands of students, there are inevitably those who, by assignment or on their own initiative, regularly inform Chinese consulates about political moods on university campuses, carefully monitor the activities of Tibetan, Hong Kong, and Taiwanese student groups, and organize counter-protests against lectures and events by critics of the Chinese regime. The Chinese diaspora in America found itself under triple pressure from hostile forces. On one hand, the MSS actively tries to recruit as many ethnic Chinese as possible, using deep patriotic feelings, family ties to the homeland, and cultural identity. On the other hand, American intelligence services increasingly suspect practically every Chinese person of potential espionage or disloyalty. The result of this paranoid atmosphere is mutual mistrust, gradual destruction of years-long scientific and business ties between the world's 2 most powerful economies, mass discrimination, and racial prejudices. Chinese scientists and engineers are massively leaving American universities and research centers. American corporations are hastily breaking long-term contracts with Chinese partners and suppliers. And now let's return to that cramped apartment in the ethnic Queens neighborhood, where our complex story about the invisible threads of modern espionage began. The man who secretly recorded private conversations of Chinese dissidents on a digital recorder that evening was named Tan Yuanjun. According to detailed investigation by the leading American publication The New York Times, this former participant in democratic protests at Tiananmen Square had secretly and systematically collaborated with Chinese intelligence for many years, transmitting detailed information about American activists, émigré political organizations, and protest action plans. Tan Yuanjun's life story is a true quintessence of Chinese intelligence strategy, and a unique example of how experienced MSS operatives can transform even the most sincere freedom fighters into their unconscious assistants. In June 1989, 20-year-old student Tan really stood shoulder to shoulder with thousands of peers on historic Tiananmen Square, among the crowd of young people who sincerely and naively demanded democratic reforms, freedom of speech, and an end to corruption in party circles. He really risked his own life when armored columns of the People's Liberation Army brutally moved against unarmed demonstrators that terrible night. He saw blood on the asphalt, heard shots and screams, helped evacuate wounded comrades. After the brutal suppression of protests and the beginning of mass arrests, he, like thousands of other movement participants, emigrated to the USA, where over the following years he became widely known and respected as a critic of the communist regime. But at some critical moment of his American life, perhaps during one of his trips to Hong Kong or Taiwan, Chinese intelligence services managed to reach this respected dissident. Perhaps these were direct threats to the life and safety of his elderly parents who remained in mainland China. Perhaps generous financial offers during a period of personal economic crisis. Perhaps sophisticated psychological pressure, manipulation of guilt feelings, and promises to improve the fate of loved ones. The exact details of the recruitment process remain classified and unknown to the general public, but the final result is obvious and undeniable. A true hero of the democratic movement gradually transformed into a valuable informant for the same dictatorship he had once heroically fought against at risk of his life. Tan Yuanjun himself categorically denies all charges brought against him, publicly calling them a dirty political conspiracy and an attempt to discredit true fighters for democracy. Perhaps he's telling the truth and really is a victim of mistaken identity or a complex disinformation operation. Perhaps this really is the result of internal contradictions in the émigré community, or revenge for his principled position. But the very theoretical possibility of such a dramatic turn of events demonstrates the true genius and long-term effectiveness of Chinese intelligence strategy. The best and most valuable agents are precisely those people who are trusted unconditionally and unreservedly, whose motives are never questioned, whose reputation serves as the best cover, and who in the émigré community can be trusted more than recognized heroes of the struggle for freedom and democracy? A parallel and no less shocking drama unfolded around the figure of Wang Shujun, an American of Chinese origin who masterfully led a double life in cosmopolitan New York for many years. During the day, he was an active and prominent participant in the local dissident movement, regularly organized meetings of political oppositionists, sincerely helped new Chinese immigrants adapt to complex American realities, openly and consistently criticized the Chinese communist regime on social networks and at public events. But at night, in the silence of his home office, the same Wang Shujun carefully compiled detailed confidential reports about his trusting friends and comrades, photographed their personal documents, recorded private conversations on a recorder, then transmitted all this compromising information to his professional handlers from the MSS through encrypted communication channels. Wang methodically and patiently embedded himself in New York's Chinese émigré community for entire decades, gradually winning trust and respect. He seemed like an absolutely reliable political ally, a sincere person who could be safely trusted with the deepest personal secrets, the most painful fears, and the boldest plans for fighting dictatorship. In reality, he was a living and high-tech surveillance system that collected impeccable compromising material on dissidents for future repressions, cataloged their weaknesses and vulnerabilities, tracked connections and financial flows of opposition organizations. When FBI agents finally arrested Wang after a long and complex investigation, they found a real treasure trove of compromising materials in his personal computer and encrypted archives. Thousands of names, home addresses, work phone numbers, personal email addresses of Chinese dissidents throughout the United States and Canada. He knew the most intimate details. Who exactly among the activists had close relatives in mainland China and could be especially vulnerable to pressure? Who specifically planned future protests and demonstrations? Who openly criticized the regime in private conversations but feared public speeches? Which organizations received funding from American foundations and government structures? Chinese espionage differs in three key features. First, it's based on extraordinarily long-term operations. Agents spend decades building trust and legends, as was the case with Tan Yuanjun and Wang Shujun. Second, priorities have shifted from military and diplomatic secrets to high-tech developments. Microchips, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, composites, and space technologies, allowing Beijing to save billions and quickly achieve technological parity. Third, it's not just about information gathering, but global influence operations, diaspora control, opposition intimidation through fox hunt, shaping public opinion in leading universities, media, and political circles. The real confrontation between the USA and China for world leadership is taking place in laboratories, universities, and immigrant communities, where trust and sympathy become the best cover, and threads of influence from Beijing permeate the entire modern world.